Hello everyone, Dr. Lindsay Bira here, bringing you more Mindful Minutes, sponsored by Mind Science Foundation, so we can all take this space for our brains. Up until now, I've gone over multiple pillars of mindfulness, mindfulness techniques, and ways to put mindfulness in action. Today, we're going to be talking about understanding other people and building empathy through mindfulness. You can tell who's tired right here. So she's joining us today again. Now, when we step into mindfulness, essentially what we're doing is we're exercising our frontal lobe. What we're also doing through that is building emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is all about noticing, labeling, and monitoring what we're feeling, noticing it, labeling, and monitoring what somebody else is feeling, and using that information to appropriately and helpfully guide our own thinking and behavior. This is essentially wisdom, where we can look at the whole picture and kind of create this understanding and better regulate ourselves and move forward in more helpful ways. So that's what we're going to tap into today. The first thing that I want to discuss is perspective. Now, most perspectives make sense if we consider the context of who someone is. And the context of who someone is made up of three things: their genetic makeup, their previous experiences, and their current stressors. So let's go over that again. Genetic makeup, previous experiences, and current stressors. If we had the insight into all three of these things and the ability to understand the complexities of how these things come together, then anything that we see in the world, any reaction, makes sense when we consider that context, okay? Now, often we don't have the ability to understand somebody's context in those ways because we just don't have enough insight or information or understand who they are, what they went through, nor should we, right? But we can have the acknowledgement that there is a context. And when we remind ourselves that, then we move from fighting against that reality. We've talked about that in this radical acceptance. But we move from fighting against the reality to creating more space for and understanding and empathizing with that reality. So let's use an example here. I always like the example of somebody cuts us off in traffic. So you're driving, trying to get somewhere, and somebody cuts you right off. Now, immediately, we feel some of that like frustration, might even be anger. We can kind of ratchet that up a little bit. So you feel that anger, you know what it feels like in your body, and then we start to have some thoughts about it. So then we start to say, this driver is such a jerk, they don't even know how to drive, they might cause an accident, and I need to teach them a lesson. If you have that last thought, then that's most likely going to lead to driving up beside them, and this is how we have road rage incidences, and it's never good. So in those moments, we're not trying to turn off the anger. We're not even trying to turn off the thoughts because those come so automatically. What a good mindfulness practice is using those emotions. We know what that feels like in our body. So using that as a cue to say, isn't this interesting? Gentle curiosity that I'm feeling so strongly about this. So let me step into a greater perspective and really think about why this might be happening. Now, what we don't get insight into is the context of that person, who they are genetically, their previous experiences driving, and what's currently happening in their life, so their current stressors. If we could have that insight, we might see something like their child throwing up in the back seat. Maybe they've lost vision in one eye, so it's hard to kind of merge. Maybe they're very distracted because they're dealing with a lot or just got bad news. Or maybe they're just really sleepy and trying to get somewhere and just made a mistake. We also don't get the chance to see if they noticed that they cut us off. If they're saying, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, driver, even if they don't wave, they might feel bad. We don't get that insight. So if we forget that that could be happening, our anger is just fueled. If we also embrace, so that's thinking about the context of of who somebody is, we also need to think about the pie chart of driving. If we're willing to have the experience of driving, we're willing to have the experience of being cut off sometimes. So just like we talked about before, I'm sorry, she's taking up so much of this space here. Just like we talked about before, When we step in the car, we are basically taking a gamble, and we may have some type of negative experience because that's a part of this, that's a slice of the pie of the entire experience of driving. So when we have that negative experience, then we try to fight against it instead of saying, well, this is exactly what I should be experiencing when I drive. And that person has some reasons why they just did that. And therefore I can take a deep breath and kind of let them go forward. Let's do a little mindfulness exercise. And we're gonna do this in 2 parts. This first part is coming this video. The next part is coming the next video. So I want you to close your eyes here. This is a little bit of visualization mixed in. I want you to take some of those slow, deep breaths. We went over the power of the breath, so you can go back to that video after this. But really breathe from your belly, just kind of notice. And I want you to bring up somebody that you really love, somebody who's easy to love. Picture their face in your mind, the expression they usually have on their face and the way they usually wear their hair. And as you breathe, just notice what that feels like, the feeling that they give you, how you would label that emotion. Imagining them doing something wrong and you really understand kind of who they are, and there might be some compassion that's easy to tap into there. Just notice what that feels like. And then with your next deep inhale, I want you to let that image kind of fall away, and in its place, I want you to bring the image of somebody who you find a little bit difficult, maybe a lot a bit difficult. Noticing what they look like, the expression they usually wear on their face, and how they usually have their hair. Noticing what that brings up for you, how you would label that emotion. And even noticing when they do something wrong, maybe they have wronged you, what that brings up for you. And stepping into that sense of compassion for them, is that harder than it was for the person who's easier to love? Just kind of notice that. There's no right or wrong here. And with your next deep inhale, I want you to kind of step into the context of who they are that we might not know, or we do. Their genetics, their previous experiences, and their current stressors. These factors that drove maybe how they're acting or their ways of being. Just gonna step into the gentle curiosity about that. Reminding yourself that however they've acted makes sense in the context of who they are. And seeing if compassion is any easier to tap into. And taking your next deep inhale, just letting that image fall away. And at the end of your exhale, gently open your eyes, feeling alert and relaxed. It is a very quick mindfulness exercise that you can do standing in line if somebody's frustrating to you, if somebody cuts you off, if somebody says something to you that you find offensive. To use that cue, that emotion, to take a deep breath and remind yourself that they are functioning from the context of who they are, and their perspective makes sense. Thanks for tuning in today. Stay tuned for next time. It'll be the last one of this series, and we're going to talk more about self-compassion, self-understanding. So join me. Thanks for working on your brains, and I will see you soon.